Hi, my name is Rick Zach, and I'm the Director of Public Safety and Justice Solutions for Microsoft. I appreciate you taking the time to join us for this discussion on how technology is changing law enforcement. Now, technology is really shaping the way that departments drive safer citizens, safer communities, and safer responders. This technology can be used to bring data together more quickly than ever, to analyze it in new ways, and to share it more effectively than ever before. But it's important to note that this technology can also be used to help identify officers who need extra resources. And as we bring this together today, we're going to be joined by representatives from a number of law enforcement agencies to share their insights. Now, the Chicago Police Department has tackled that officer wellness issue head on and driven some really breakthrough capabilities to, again, identify those officers where a little more help is needed. And this was driven in concert with the University of Chicago Crime Lab. And so today we'll have Sabi Khan, who's the Deputy Chief for Strategic Initiatives, joined by Maggie Goodrich from the University of Chicago Crime Lab, who is the former CIO for the Los Angeles Police Department. The next area we're going to focus on is around really digital policing, making this a digital process from beginning to end. And we're going to get some insights from the Western Australia Police Force, where Darren Henstock is going to take us through how they developed the strategy, how they've executed it, and what their outcomes are. And the last area we're going to cover is how new capabilities like artificial intelligence can drive the everyday operations of police officers. We'll be joined by Frank Rubin, a member of Microsoft's Azure Global team and the former IT director for the Atlanta Police Department and a former sworn officer. Now, Microsoft plays a critical role in the law enforcement operations and the entire public safety journey, but it's often behind the scenes from a lot of the departments where our technology is being used. But at every step along the way, from the capabilities that are deployed before there's a call for service, through the capabilities needed to manage an incident, and then to move both a case and a person through that criminal justice process, at each one of these stops, there's a solution built around Microsoft or Microsoft providing a first-party solution. And at the bottom, you can see just how many solution areas where Microsoft is engaged, both directly with law enforcement agencies and with the solution providers that support them. Backing this is a real commitment around compliance. And what I share here is a broad range of compliance standards where Microsoft, through its cloud platforms, can support both law enforcement agencies and the solution providers that support them. I'll call out a few that are important, especially to law enforcement. If you look on the second band, is the CJIS security policy. Critically important to support the work of law enforcement agencies across the United States. And Microsoft provides a contractual commitment that we've implemented all of the security controls and processes required to meet the requirements of the CJIS security policy. But we've gone beyond that to sign agreements with the states that will cover every law enforcement agency in that state. So Microsoft has taken the high bar approach. We've put in the controls that a law enforcement agency is required to put in, the same processes, and we bind ourselves contractually with the FBI, with the state who holds the CJIS ticket. And this way we support our law enforcement agency customers by putting ourselves on the same side of the table as they are. And it's this way where we share that responsibility with the law enforcement agencies, which gives them the trust to put their critical workloads, to leverage solutions out of our Azure government platform, knowing that they are in full support of their compliance requirements. But that's just the beginning. And as you see here, Microsoft operates supporting law enforcement agencies all around the world, and we do it through a network of data centers that provide support for the critical compliance standards for law enforcement, other data, government data standards all around the world. This is a look at just some, not all, some of the solution providers that support the mission of law enforcement, both in the United States and around the world. And it's critical to note that the companies that law enforcement agencies trust Microsoft to deliver their solution through our clouds and other platforms. So as we move on to make this real for all of you, we're going to start by talking about how technology can be used to reach officers in need, and provide leadership the opportunity to identify them and get them the resources they need to support the officer health and wellness that's so critical in today's climate. To help address this critical issue, the Chicago Police Department and the University of Chicago Crime Lab worked together to develop a next generation early intervention system. Its new officer support system uses Chicago Police Department administrative data to help identify those officers who could benefit most from additional support and resources. And now we're going to hear from two law enforcement leaders who took on this challenge. Sabi Khan is the Deputy Chief for Strategic Initiatives at the Chicago Police Department, and he began his career as a law enforcement officer, moving then later into various roles in crime analysis and intelligence, and now in this role where he leads data-driven policing initiatives. He represented Chicago Police Department's position on the technology aspect of the project, and it utilizes Microsoft Dynamics as the platform for this new officer support system. Maggie Goodrich was formerly the Chief Information Officer of the Los Angeles Police Department, currently serves as a consultant to the University of Chicago Crime Lab. She's a project director for the Chicago Police Department's officer support system. So Sabi, we're going to start with you. What really drove the development of the officer support system?
Yeah, Rick, thanks for having me at this IACP event. For us, what really drove is that we needed to find one solution system where we have what we call the talent management suite. It's a one system where you can access information about officers. We call it the back office application, where I can identify an officer's training, their disciplinary history, their accolades of what they've done really well, but also built into that, this officer support system. So it's a one-stop shop system, and obviously police departments don't have that capability of going off the shelf and just buying one thing. So we invested a lot in what you call Microsoft Dynamics, which is a platform. And so to invest in a platform, it gave us the flexibility to customize and build applications that we needed. So the office support system was a module within our talent management suite that feeds into the jacket of an employee. That jacket contains anything from their start date, their picture, their, like I mentioned, their history, to this officer support model where it helps us identify officers that need support before it's too late. So that really was the driving factor and why we went down with this platform, but we needed help. We can go ahead and purchase the technology, but we need somebody to help on the academic side to help build those models. I mean, we're all collecting so much data these days, but what variable really helps in that model? What identifies that an officer needs support? And that's where we really went out to University of Chicago's Crime Lab and asked for that assistance. And they were amazing partners to help us through working through those issues.
So you mentioned something interesting, which is about getting that additional insight, right? Taking the data and really uncovering the patterns inside and the real indicators. And I know, Maggie, that's where the University of Chicago Crime Lab came into it. Could you tell us about the role of the Crime Lab and the way that you use data to understand these drivers that are so critical in reaching officers who are in need?
Sure, Rick. So the role of the Crime Lab really was to use the data to help identify those officers who are most in need of support. Traditional early intervention systems across the country are often basically a negotiation process under a federal consent decree. What CPD did here was well before consent decree ever came into play. They decided to be proactive and really think about what really causes an officer to need support. And so that's where the Crime Lab came in. And we really built this from the ground up with CPD, first holding focus groups and pulling together a national advisory committee with experts from across the country to think about what adverse events do you really want to prevent. What keeps you up at night question, right? And how do you know when an officer needs support? And what kinds of things would cause an officer to need support? And from there, the Crime Lab with CPD selected specific types of adverse outcomes that it wanted to identify to help then target services and supports toward officers, and use the historical data to determine what factors were most associated with those future adverse events or outcomes. and then select the most relevant factors from that data to develop these data models for the OSS. So the idea here is really to let the data tell us when an officer needs support, rather than doing this based on intuition and negotiation.
You raise an interesting question. I'm going to put this to both of you, which is, how does your approach in terms of having the data science, and Maggie, you said having the data tell you, how does that help to overcome sometimes the perceived stigma of not wanting help, not being seen as someone who needs help? Is the way that you work through the data and the way, Sabi, that you deliver OSS out, does it help to work past that normal barrier?
So for ours, I'm going to let Maggie answer most of this because she's the expert in it. But for us, it was really important to explain to the officers that this isn't disciplinary, right? You don't come up in here and we're watching you because this is a discipline issue. It's really a true support system. It truly is that you've been flagged because we've identified something somewhere where you may need help and some assistance. And we have a list of those caveats or those end results where we can provide you, be it counseling, be it something else. And I think Maggie can probably explain it much better, but I mean, that's from my understanding on that. So Maggie, what do you think?
Using the data, I think, certainly helps with just user adoption generally, because it's different to say, we understand from the data you are 8 times more likely to experience an adverse outcome in the next year. That is, much more, I think, convincing than saying, we think 3 complaints in 6 months is something we should pay attention to.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed.
It moves it from anecdotal, right? Just someone's observation, to which people may think that there's a personal component to it. My supervisor doesn't like me or something. But you're right, when you make it data driven and sort of the same model across everybody, I could see how that would reduce the perceived sort of knock implied by an officer saying, I don't need help, I'm great, you're just out to get me. Data actually helps them see, no, this is a tool that can help me get the services I need.
Correct.
Yeah, and Rick, also in that, I mean, we're a very large department. We're 13,000 strong. So, you may have an issue with an officer in some district, and that only goes up to that first level supervisor, and he may only see one part of that person's portfolio, right? I mean, you have officers moving from district to district, from unit to unit, so nobody has a full grasp of somebody's complete history. And so this is where you consolidate all that data from all the units and all their years of service into one central location that has this 30,000-foot view of this, and they can actually flag it. Whereas, I just have maybe 30, 40 officers work for me, and I may be an officer might be working for me, and I'm a sergeant that I've never worked for before. And, a couple months later, he might or she might go off to somewhere else, and then I'm not following that person. So I think that's why it's also really important, is consolidating all this data for an eagle eye view.
Hey, Maggie, were there any surprises in the data, broadly speaking, about variables that you thought would be important coming in and weren't, or things that didn't seem to be very indicative, and then when you got in the data, it turns out they were actually important indicators?
I don't know that there were any surprises that way, because we really went in assuming nothing, and understanding that the data was going to tell us itself what was important. I will say that one of the challenges was working with the data is that even though police departments collect an enormous amount of data on a daily basis just through regular activity, that in some instances, it's still a relatively small set of data. So, in order to really let the data speak for itself, you really need a good sized data set in order to really be statistically valid. And so I think there were things that we were hoping we might be able to identify in the data that certainly just don't occur with enough frequency to enable an analysis in the manner that it was performed here.
Well, but your point is a really important one, that it's about the statistical significance, right? That it's very robust data science. It's not a casual flip through a spreadsheet, right? This was sort of rigorous work through the data to let the data shape the conclusions, and not starting with a conclusion and finding data that help tell that story. And does that add to this sort of acceptance with officers, the idea that there's real data science behind this, and not just and not just sort of a lightweight poke around in the data? Did that come across when you rolled it out?
I think a few things help with the adoption of the system. One, that there is real data science behind the system, that we weren't just guessing at what might be indicative of an officer needing support. Two, I think, is really about providing a good menu of supports and services for it to be made available to officers. So where CPD really started was at the end, meaning at the end, if an officer is identified, you need to have something to actually offer them to support them, right? And so if you're just sending everybody to the same training when they're identified by the system, that's not really helpful. So CPD did a really good job of thinking through what's the menu of supports, services, trainings that need to be made available so that a plan can be developed to support an officer's unique needs and unique situation, and not just make it a one size fits all.
That raises an interesting question for you, Sabi, which is, we talked about the challenge that you're trying to meet, and Maggie sharing how the data really drove the insights around the OSS. How does it work operationally? Like when it's in the field, how is it used? How do officers interact with it? How to supervise? Like, what does it look like in the real world, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk a little bit about that. So we have a centralized unit here at police headquarters that manages that. So when an alert happens off of the system, there's a dedicated area analyst that reviews that and makes sure that what the model has flagged is accurate, right? Mm-hmm. Is the information correct? Is the model working properly? And then after that, it's them reaching out directly to that that officer's supervisor, informing their district commander of the flag that came up, and then really it's on that supervisor to review it and move forward with the interventions that Maggie had just talked about. So really, that the business logic and process is not that complicated, and it's not that complicated for a reason. It's because we want to cut down and make sure that we get to the end result, which is getting them help right away and not going through a long bureaucratic process, right? Where you need everybody to sign off on it before we can even offer an officer help. I mean, that's not the point. The whole point is to identify officers that need help and get them the help quickly. And if we added a really long business process, it would defeat the point. So yeah, that's how it really looks like in the field. We're piloting it right now in one of our districts, and so far so good. And obviously the goal is to go citywide with it once we are making sure that our logic and our business process and the technology is working and the models are working properly and well to be able to pilot it across the entire city.
And Sabi touches on another really important point of the system, and that is to get supervisors talking to the officers who receive work items. The data-driven tool is just that. It's a tool, but it can't tell you 100% that this officer needs support. The administrative data CPD collects does not tell you anything about what might be going on in the officer's personal life that might be causing stress. At home, maybe they're going through a divorce, maybe they're caring for an elderly parent. And that's causing stress in their lives. It has nothing to do with the job. And so it's really important here that supervisors are empowered to sit down with the officer, have a meaningful conversation, be trained and be prepared to have potentially a difficult conversation, and really think through how to best support that officer in whatever it may be that they're going through. But that centralized unit that CPD has established as well is really critical to that process, because that centralized unit provides support to those supervisors. So if a supervisor is unsure how to approach a conversation or unsure what supports or services might be appropriate for an officer, that's where that centralized unit has some expertise and can really ensure the officer gets what they need, and also ensure that the system is used consistently across the department.
Well, and you hit such important points there, that consistency part. right? That it's delivered consistently. Sabi's your point about having policy around it, right? A consistent policy that supports it. All of that is about helping to get resources and support for officers in need and overcoming some of those barriers that are normally there. I've got one question for both of you as we wrap this up, and the question is, I'm imagining I'm a chief in the audience watching this. How can other departments learn from your insights through the data and through your own experience of turning data into a solution out in the field that can help officers?
Yeah, I mean, on my part, I would say to all the chiefs that are out there that, think outside of the box. A lot of times, a lot of us leaders in technology, law enforcement, are picking something right off the shelf, and we're sold something that says, "Hey, this is how this works, and it's going to resolve all your needs in one stop shop, cookie cutter software system." And I am a proponent, and I've been a proponent when I joined here at the Chicago Police Department, to look at tools that are not industry agnostic, look at tools that are being utilized by the private sector and other tools and platforms, really, because then when you invest in a platform, it gives you the flexibility to build and modify and customize to your department's needs. And not every department is made the same, right? What might be a flag here in Chicago might not be a flag somewhere else. And so that's why I think that every chief should out there look at different platforms. When you think of Microsoft Dynamics, you don't think of law enforcement right away, but that's something where there's a lot of other applications, a lot of other tools out there that are being used by a lot of other industries that are applicable to law enforcement.
Yeah, and I would just add that from the University of Chicago's perspective, the Crime Lab plans to make this approach and these data models available to any agency that's interested in implementing a similar methodology at no cost to agencies. The Crime Lab is completely privately funded through private and public donors, and the idea really is to help as many agencies as possible.
That's terrific. I think, those lessons that you were able to derive out of the data, not just from the data about officers, but the experience of starting with data and really building a system out to reach those officers in need, is a powerful example for a lot of other departments who are facing this very important issue across the country and around the world. So thank you both so much for sharing your time, your experience, your insights. What you've done is going to help countless Chicago police officers. And I know as other departments start to take advantage of your insights, take advantage of the work done by the Crime Lab, so many other officers in the country and around the world will benefit. So thank you for the great work you've done, and thank you for joining us for this IACP session today.
Thank you for this.
Digital operations and insights are becoming some of the most important tools in law enforcement. Now we'll have a chance to learn about the digital transformation for the Western Australia Police Force. Darren Henstock is the Assistant Divisional Officer for its newly formed Digital Policing Division. He's going to share the development, direction, and implementation of their digital strategy and its impact on their operations and their outcomes.
Okay, thanks, Rick. So, thank you all. I'm Inspector Darren Henstock. I'm ADO at the Digital Policing Division in Western Australia Police, newly formed division, and our aim is to introduce complementary and disruptive digital capabilities to the Western Australian Police Force. So we have had multiple attempts to do mobility over the past 5 to 8 years. Unfortunately, they've all failed for one reason or another: costs, time frame, politics at the time, just not the right time. 2 years ago, we had a change of commissioner, and shortly after a chief information officer and then a deputy commissioner, and there was some momentum to deliver change and deliver two of the foundational parts that we built on for digital policing. That was body-worn video and the mobility solution. So we created a team back in 2018 that was largely made up of blue shirt police officers, so from the front line, alongside consultants and technical resources as well from our business information systems. But crucially, this was the first time that senior police officers were running this mobility program to try and take advantage of the way we understand we should work and to move things quickly forwards in developing these two projects. and our mantra became "built for coppers by coppers," so that we really could take ownership of this product. So body-worn video was the first cab off the rank, and it was moving to a new system for us, which was moving everything into the cloud. So cloud storage and cloud computing, alongside service software as a service. And say body-worn video, and Axon won the contract. Was the first one we came to, because it was going to be internally funded to the tune of $21 million. And since introducing that, we've now become the largest user of Axon Citizen in the world, and shown significant time savings in relation to officers going out, seizing CCTV, getting it back into our evidence management system, removing the need for them to get thumb drives or CDs that may or may not work when they get back to the station. So it's been a huge success story. But this also showed to government and Treasury that we were serious about making changes. We were willing to invest our own money into the first foundational piece of work, and that provided us the opportunity to go out to our partners with what we produced was a day in the life of a police officer. So this was what we took out, and it was simply just to create and show what was possible for all our partner agencies. And we went to our own internal people to show what we thought could happen, and they could see where we were aiming to get to. The capabilities here are interspersed between what was currently available and we knew was working in other jurisdictions, and what we thought may be the future going forwards, and largely based off stuff that I'd done with the UK when I was a serving police officer there and doing this similar project, and also from my experience at Cambridge University studying with partners from across the world. So I had a good idea of what else was available. This realistically just created a talking point. It showed our partners where the touch points were with their business, and we got the impression that if AA Police went forwards with this transformation, this digital move, then our partners would start to follow suit. And but they just wanted to see how we did it, if we were successful, and then they'll come along for the ride. But our aims were to create visible policing, remove those tethers from the police officers going back to the stations, and give them the right information at the right place at the right time so they could do their job more effective. But this is where we are now. Within 12 months, we have agreed our contract with Axon. We could offer officers the ability to capture scenes, share their videos, use their new phones that we'd given them to search and work out who people were, and do the biometric testing and confirm identities, sharing information. And our body-worn video rollout within 12 months across the largest jurisdiction in the world was something that was we're very proud of. In the process of doing this, we obtained $35 million from Treasury for the mobility project, which allowed us to roll out 4,500 Apple iPhone 11s to our frontline officers. Again, across the largest policing jurisdiction in the world, and done in 8 weeks. So again, a huge feat of administration, but that gave a minimum viable product to our officers of email and calendar on their phones. Never before had they had that ability to look at their emails wherever they were. And we gave them the search functionality so they could search for persons, vehicles, places on their phones as well, and get the information to their fingertips rather than relying on radio. And we also gave them a GPS tracking app that we created ourselves that allowed them to see where they were, where their colleagues were, and also communicate within that platform. It proved very, very successful. We had some high-profile safety wins with that, where people were found who were lost in the bush, where officers managed to have support tracked to them by colleagues, and dealing with large and major incidents. And that app has now become one of our Class 1 apps supporting the agency moving forward in large events and major incidents. The way we rolled our mobile phones out was that they were personal issue. That iPhone came to that officer with as much data as they needed and wanted, and we're not unduly tracking that use. Yes, we'll be notified if they use a huge amount of it, but 20 or 30 gigabytes is fine as far as we're concerned. And that was a key message from our commissioner that he wanted to trust the officers. He wanted to give them something back so they could use that phone as a personal phone as well as a work tool. And we tried to delineate the two areas of the phone. And that is probably the only jurisdiction in Australia and New Zealand where that process has been done. We blacklist apps that we don't want them to have, but they're allowed free access to any app they normally would have on a personal phone. And again, proving very successful. And that has managed to get us working through officers and allowing them to start using the device more effectively. The plan then was to look towards Microsoft productivity apps. So officers didn't need to go back to the station. They could get their Word documents, their PowerPoints, files, they could share them, they could do all the things that a modern business would do with cloud storage and Microsoft productivity. And that was a 9-month project of OneDrive and Teams and Stream and all those other products within our total enterprise Microsoft stack. Unfortunately, that arrived at the same time as the COVID pandemic hit Western Australia. And instead of 9 months, I got instructed that they wanted it out in 2 weeks. So we rolled Teams out in 2 weeks to the entire frontline agency. Every staff member was put onto a Teams, individual Teams group and team so that they could communicate between themselves. We instigated home working with Azure virtual desktops, and we created through the phones an ability for security that they could work from any device at home or wherever they were. So within 2 to 4 weeks, we had the entire agency working remotely using Microsoft productivity apps and creating a really good scenario for our officers to work from wherever, whenever, and however they wanted to. During that time, my team was seconded to the State Pandemic Coordination Centre, which was a team set up to be a multi-agency group in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, reporting directly to the State Emergency Coordinator and our Premier, providing them real-time information and support from all the agencies operating within Western Australia. I have to say Microsoft Teams and the support from the Microsoft team here in Western Australia was the only thing that kept our head above water during that time. We could bring any other member of any other agency into our tenancy on Teams and share immediately our files with them and then with us, and get them working within an hour on the products that we needed to inform the Premier and inform our strategy for dealing with COVID-19. Whilst obviously we can't take any credit for the way Western Australia dealt with COVID-19, that streamlining of agencies, that ability to bring agencies together really, really quickly had not been possible before, and got that team working quickly, effectively. And it has now shown a real tendency for our partner agencies to see that capability that we provided through Dynamics, through Teams, and all the other products that we were allowed to use within the Microsoft stack. And they're now moving towards the same use, and it's driven that change and that transformation across multiple agencies now. So really a very strong success story. Okay, so in the next year though, we've got 3 distinct streams that we're concentrating on. That's to continue to maximize our enterprise agreement with Microsoft, so use all the capabilities that brings to the table. We're developing our CAD tasking app that is a long-term contract with Motorola, so that officers have that dispatching capability on their devices. And any gaps that we find in that, we'll build our bespoke apps. So I have a team of developers that sit with me that are seconded in with my blue shirts, my frontline police officers, and that's how we build the apps and we increase the capability within Microsoft. So there's 2 styles of work going on. We've got the CAD tasking process with Motorola. That's realistically a traditional lean waterfall method of delivery, because it's a known contract that we have. The other 2, the Microsoft and the build of apps, is done in a full agile way, or at least my interpretation of an agile way. And that is bringing officers into the team. That's working with our developers, and we do a build for perhaps 6 weeks to develop a proof of concept. We then release that out to our frontline officers in a controlled environment, and they test it for us. They give us their feedback. They show us what they do and they don't want, and we bring that back in and make the changes, and then we roll into an enterprise solution. So invariably, we've got a 0 to enterprise solution in about 12 weeks, and that's proving very popular with the guys on the ground, because they know they now have influence and say over the product. It's not been all plain sailing. We have a massive training issue, particularly with the COVID response that made us roll this stuff out really, really quickly. We didn't get to do the training and the association and the business integration that we wanted to do. So we're going back out to capture that now. But officers are using these things. They've put their hands on them, and they're giving us good feedback as they go. Yes, we've got 25% of people that will take it up. We've got 50% of people that we work with and they'll start to use it. And we've got the usual 25% who won't touch it. We just leave them for peer-to-peer discussion, and they'll pick it up in their own good time as everyone else says what a good product it is. And that's being our way forward now for a few months. We've also had issues with how quickly we are moving, and success for us is done within a few weeks, and now we're expected to deliver those things again in a few weeks, no matter the complexity or hardship with it. That's the timeframes we're being held to. But we have a range of skills within our officers from the front line. We bring in what we need. We allow them to develop how they think they want things to work, and then we follow that off with the guys on the green. And we have really strong leadership from our commissioner and deputy commissioners, forcing the message from the other side of the executive, and that is proving a really good balance now, with that being displayed across the senior leadership and us from the guys in the field and on the front line doing the job. So into the final slide. This is realistically what we do. We have these three strands at the top that feed into our policing pillars: intelligence, collaboration, and mobility, or inform, connect, and simplify. That's our CIO's mantra, and we build in relation to that. The projects we have are rolling along the bottom of the slide. But in relation to collaboration, we have body-worn video, the OneForce phone, and the Microsoft apps. That gives us that opportunity to communicate, to share, to deliver stuff in a controlled environment. That we were using WhatsApp and stuff like that before, which we can't manage to maintain. This is a much better closed ecosystem that we can share with the whole Microsoft environment and the partners within Azure tenancy, and we're finding that as a really powerful tool for giving officers that understanding and knowledge out in the field. Our intelligence, so we've got our search capabilities, we've got CAD, we're looking at video analytics that we have. We have electronic pocket notebooks that we're going to trial very soon, a product called Near Me for Cops, which gives officers real-time information of what's going on around them, culled from all our systems, and they can then put layers onto their phone in a mapping scenario. It's looking really exciting for a lot of officers. And then we have SOZE, which is our AI analytics that we built with a company called Modus and the Microsoft team here, which is proving a huge benefit in investigations and high-level investigations. So we showed that across 7 major technical crime investigations, 1,778 days of investigation was reduced down to 10 by using the SOZE AI product. So again, something we're developing to join the dots, which is our Deputy Commissioner's mantra, to say, I want officers to have all the information. We don't know what we don't know. We want products that find information for us and give that to the officers. So where they are, they get the information at the right time and at the right place and to the right people to work on it. And simplify. The mobile phone platform has simplified the way we get information, the way we use information, and the way we share information. And every officer now has that in the palm of their hands. We've got the locate capability where they can see where each other is. They can roll an instance and deal with incidents through there. We've got a bail and BOLO apps coming out that allow us to see where our bailees are, where our people who are wanted are in the fingertips, and at the discretion of the officers on the ground. Walkie-talkie apps that we're looking at through Microsoft Teams now to take away that load from the radio, and Teams providing that collaboration space. And finally, we took in an aid memoir using Microsoft products so that we can build simply and with low coding, so that we can work on these aid memoirs to officers so they know what they're doing at the right time. They're going to follow policy. They can query that straight away, and they can follow the guidance that we're putting out there. And that's really easy for us to then do using the Microsoft suite of capabilities, and officers can change it as we change products. No longer are we delivering products over 12 months by developers who are not in touch with the front line. We've got a vibrant team here that are delivering change at a rapid pace and working alongside the front line, and we're delivering stuff that they want to use, and the uptake has been fantastic. So we're continuing to do that and follow our mantra of built for coppers by coppers, and it's working really well over here in Western Australia.
Thanks, Darren. Making the Western Australia police force truly digital was an ambitious goal, and the great work by you and your team made it happen.
Thanks, Rick. No problem, and glad to be part of the message.
Many police departments are faced with two challenges: constrained resources and limited collaboration. Now, technology can help to address both by solutions that amplify the work of officers and analysts, and by a platform that empowers them to collaborate both across a department and with other departments and other stakeholders. Frank Rubin from Microsoft is going to share an example of this strategy in action. Now, Frank began his career as a sworn officer with the Atlanta Police Department and later became the Information Technology Director for the department. Frank joined Microsoft to bring his insights into police operations and information technology to deliver new solutions for law enforcement. Frank?
Thanks, Rick. So as Rick said, we are looking at how Microsoft Teams can be part of a unified operation to join together different law enforcement agencies who are engaged in some kind of common operation to go after, in this case, what we have here is 1,500 fictitious fugitives that are wanted for different gun crimes in various parts of the country. And so what we're looking at right here is actually a Power BI dashboard that has been embedded into our Teams channel for Operation Contoso, which is the fictitious name of our fugitive roundup here. And we can see that we have a countdown of how many fugitives are in custody versus how many fugitives are still outstanding. And the idea here is that this would be shown at some kind of command post. So if you had a command center that was, traditionally right now you might have an Excel document or some other kind of static document that you're looking at to track the number of fugitives that you have in custody versus who's been already arrested. This is the idea here, is to be able to show this in a way that lets you actually interact with the data, but also keeps the data refreshed so you're getting constant updates. So as I go through here and click through the different elements within this Power BI dashboard, you can see that the whole dashboard starts to change. So these all cross-reference one another. And if you've never used Power BI for law enforcement, it's gaining a lot of traction. And we're seeing a lot of use for not just like ad hoc operations like this, but also for things that are more relevant to strategic crime analysis. So for things like CompStat reports that you might be using static kind of reporting instruments like PDF documents or Excel sheets, this can be a great tool for that. And it embeds right here into our Teams channel. So as part of this, I wanted to talk a little bit about the extensibility of Teams, what you can do if you're already using it. You might be collaborating on it. You might be sending instant messages to one another or using it to share files. But there's a lot more that you can do with it that a lot of agencies we find don't know about. So we're going to walk in here to this chat session here, and then we're talking to a bot. So this is a chat bot that's built in our cloud platform called Azure, and using a SDK called Bot Framework. So we have a persona here that we're playing is an investigator or some kind of agent who's been assigned to be part of this task force, and they have arrested a fugitive. And what we want to do is we want to report that arrest up to our command staff and get it documented so that we can keep track of the efficacy of the operation. So it's going to ask us here to tell it the idea of the fugitive that the team has arrested. So we're going to put in a random number that actually corresponds to one of those fugitives that we saw on the Power BI dashboard. And when we do that, it's going to go retrieve an image of one of our fugitives. In this case, it's a Microsoft employee. And it's going to ask us if this is the correct person and to confirm that this is in fact the arrest that we've made. And once we do that, it's going to make a change to our dashboard, to the same database that is feeding into that dashboard. So if we went back and refreshed it right now, we would see that this individual is in custody and we have one more arrest that's been made and one less person that's outstanding. So it's going to ask some, it's going to kick off a workflow here where it asks some different questions about the arrest. And if you think about other ways to leverage this, you can actually use this to have some compliance checks for standard operating procedure. So if you had a procedure that you wanted to make sure was being followed, you wanted to check for compliance, you could operationalize that within something like a chatbot like this. So then it's going to ask us if we have any photographs or documents that relate to the arrest. So in this case, what we're going to share with our chatbot, and notice that we're doing this through the conventional mechanisms within Teams. So we're not having to go into an application and click on a dialog box and submit a file. We're just doing it as an attachment, just as you would in Teams. So what we're sending here to our bot is a image of what would presumably be our bad guy's apartment or house or office, wherever we went in and made the arrest. And once we do that, our bot is going to take this image here and it's going to send it to a computer vision model that's also part of our cloud platform. This is being hosted by something called Azure Cognitive Services. And what it's doing is it's looking for a computer in this instance. And it can be trained to look for all different kinds of objects. Anything that you can have in a picture, you can train the cognitive services model to look for. But once it finds the computer, it's going to give us an alert. And the thinking behind this is that if we take a picture of either, in this case, the interior of somebody's house or office, the cognitive services model can look for things that we might overlook. So the computer, which would presumably contain some evidence, especially if we're investigating some kind of, gang crime or, maybe it's a burglary ring or something like that, we get an alert back saying, hey, there's a computer in this image. And it's going to ask us if we want to seize the computer as evidence. And so in this case, we're going to go ahead and hit yes here. But if we were to hit no, perhaps we could send an alert to our leadership chain to let them know that there's a computer at this location and it's not being seized for some reason. So there might be a need to bring in more resources or to bring in a prosecutor to help with a search warrant or forensic people, whatever we might want to do. We can build in that business logic into this chatbot so that we're kicking off these workflows that keep everything in sync. So it's going to ask us some basic questions about the computer. And again, this could mirror some kind of standard operating procedure. If you had an SOP that pertains to the seizure of electronic devices, you could keep that operating procedure mirrored here within the chatbot. And it's going to go through these different check marks. So it's asking, is the computer plugged in? So we'll hit yes here, right? And if we had a policy that said we want to leave the computer plugged in until a forensic investigator gets out to collect it, it could remind them to do that. So then it's going to ask if CSI has been contacted to do a forensic analysis. And we're going to go ahead and hit no here. And it's going to ask us for the address where we should send the CSI team to. And we're just going to put in a fictitious address here. And also the email address for the investigator who's requesting the CSI personnel. And the idea here is to be able to bring this unified platform of communication to what would normally be kind of disparate, siloed police departments operating with one another. So you don't have to get over a radio frequency and understand everybody else's codes and signals. This is just a simple workflow that happens, and we're going to send an alert to our crime scene investigator. So we're going to put our phone number in here, and once that happens, it's going to send an alert not just to the Teams channel in here, but also to my phone. So there's an integration here with Twilio. So it's sending me a text message, presuming I'm the crime scene investigator, and it's telling me to go back into the Teams channel because there's some sort of request for service. So if I look here at the CSI channel, I can see that there's these new CSI response requests, which are mirroring that alert that we sent out through our chatbot. And so also something else that Rick mentioned is doing real-time alerts for license plate readers. And let me click back over here real quick and go into another instance of this chatbot. And in fact, before I do that, let me just show a quick slide that's embedded into this Teams channel. So the problem here, just to give kind of a baseline, is the image you see right here, which is an alert that is being hit off of this car right here, this Volkswagen that's in the image. This is a stolen car, and a police officer, a police vehicle that is catty-cornered that isn't aware that this alert is getting through. And the reason why is because it took so long for this to get to the field. In this case, in this particular instance, it was over 4 minutes before this alert was able to make its way from the license plate reader solution into dispatch and out to the field as an all points bulletin. And so this officer drove by without any knowledge that this vehicle was stolen and wanted for a crime. So what we're trying to do is solve this through more modern data techniques using event sourcing. So instead of doing traditional operations in a database, we're using this event-driven pattern to make things go much, much faster. And so the way that this is operationalized in the case of how we're doing it here with this chatbot is our first persona is we're simulating the role of an investigator who is working on a crime, and they need to get a license plate, a vehicle into our license plate reader system. So that's what we're going to start with here. And we're going to go ahead and input a license plate and a vehicle into our chatbot. And notice that we just use this add word to bring this dialogue up. But you could have any kind of command that this could recognize to do the same thing. So if you said I want to add a vehicle to the watch list, we could train our chatbot to know that that means to bring this dialogue up. And so as I go through here, I'm just going to fill out this form quickly with some fake data and enter some notes. So as we go through this, it's doing something similar to what we observed before, where it's looking at some of the things that we put in, and it's saying, okay, you flagged this vehicle as a high-risk car, and I need to ask you some questions about it. So this, again, might mirror some kind of SOP. So it's asking us if the subject that's associated with the vehicle is armed. We're going to go ahead and hit yes here. It's asking if they are known to be in a gang. We'll go ahead and hit no here. And then if they have any kind of criminal history that includes violent encounters with law enforcement. And again, these can be any kind of check marks you want to go through. And then it's going to ask us for an actual photo of the subject that might be associated with this vehicle. So it might be the suspect in the crime that caused this car to go onto the watch list. So we're going to go ahead and send an image of our suspect here, which is a mugshot in this case. And then it's also going to ask us if we have a picture of the vehicle. So we're going to go ahead and send an image of what would presumably be the actual car that we're looking for. And then it's just going to bring up what it's going to put into our LPR system, and it's just going to ask us to confirm this and make sure that it's all correct. So once we do that, it's gone ahead and sent an approval workflow to maybe a supervisor to get them to approve this, depending on what your policies might be. And it's added to the LPR as a vehicle that we're looking for. So what we're going to show next is the alerting phase of this. And right here we have a simple application that simulates a license plate reader. So we're generating some fake random license plates, and we're sending it into this architecture. So we're shipping this data right into these event hubs. So it's going to ask us how many license plates we want to send to it. And we're going to go ahead and hit 100 here. So it's going to randomly generate some license plates, and it's sent all of those into our service in about 1/10 of a second. so we can see how fast that's happening. And then once we hit enter, it's going to go ahead and send the license plate that we just put into our alerting system. And we can see how quickly that came through. So once we sent that alert in, we see this surface in our Teams channel directly. So this is, and we'll get to how it surfaced and what it's going to display in a second here. But now we're changing roles from being the investigator, putting it into the watch list. Now I'm an officer in the field, and I'm nearby this license plate reader where this hit was detected. So we're going to go ahead and display this alert. And it's going and querying our LPR system in addition to like our RMS, right? So it's trying to put together some pieces of data for us to give that to us in a way that helps inform our response. So here we're looking at an actual, ostensibly be, not in this case because it's a demo, be actual images from the LPR itself. So we're getting that to the officer immediately. And we're going to go ahead and hit that we're going to respond to this alert. And what's happened is when the bot alerted us to it, it actually went into a service called Azure Maps, which is you're able to run geospatial queries within. And it's looking at the position of the LPR and the position of police cars nearby, presuming that they might be coming from like an AVL service or something like that. And it's finding the nearest police vehicles to the LPR, and it's providing us with a targeted alert. So it's not just going out as an all points bulletin or something like that over the radio. We're also getting back the LPR images from the actual LPR reader, the suspect and vehicle images that we put in before. And then it's also going to go through this kind of cascading flow of actionable intelligence. So what we're seeing here is the original case, the report that is associated with a crime that led to this car being put on the watch list, and also some criminal associates, people who are known to be associated with our bad guy in this case. So the idea here is to be able to provide as much relevant data to the officer as they are responding to the call, as they are responding to go get this vehicle. And you could think of this as being really helpful in something like complying with a pursuit policy. So if you need to understand immediately what the original crime is that this car is associated with, you can do that right here as this information was delivered. So I would encourage you to look at Teams if it's something that you're already using within your department and you're not leveraging it to its fullest extent, or if it's something that you own and that you're not actually using, please reach out to us, and we are happy to talk about it with you. And with that, I will hand it back to Rick.
Thank you, Frank. That was a powerful example of how technology can amplify the work of police officers and help to connect the dots across the department and with a range of other stakeholders. We saw today how technology can transform a department's operations and help to support their officers. Microsoft works closely with law enforcement agencies around the world, as well as the technology solution providers that support them. We look forward to working closely with you. So thank you for joining us for the session today, and thank you for your service to drive safer citizens, communities, and responders.